All right, hey, it's George DiGianni. I have Dr. Webster who's going to join me here in a moment, talking today about causes and symptoms of nutrient deficiencies. And it's extremely important that you recognize that the body does not produce these vitamins and minerals. Hold on, Dr. Webster's trying to get in. While you may be aware of that, some people are aware of it, some are not, that you can get these nutrients through food and supplementation only. We often dismiss them, the power of them. And some people are aware of how beneficial nutrients are, taking supplements, eating healthy food. But I don't think many people put the connection together with how being deficient in these nutrients are equally as profound in our lives, and how they lead to certain ailments and affect our immune system and extra stress. Who needs more stress? Webster, you do that every week. We see your palm.
We got to get everything straight, George.
So I'm going to give it right back to you. How do you like that? Okay.
There we go.
Now, for some reason, when we do these videos, I have no trouble hearing you. But when I listen to the playback, you're much louder than I am. And I've got a loud voice. I don't know what's going on, but I've got a booming voice, so I can't pick up on why.
I don't know either. I've noticed that too, though.
Oh.
Look at this, George. I want to show you what I've done here. In my room, I have done sound deadening all around me, multiple cushions, everything to try to stop echoes. It's everywhere.
I didn't think it was echoing terribly before.
Not too bad. I noticed on the first one I didn't have any of this up, and it echoed a lot worse, so it's helped quite a bit.
Okay, so we have several people on. We have Scott and Fred on. We have Yvonne. We have Laura. If you want to interact with us today, go ahead and ask questions, because this is a really important show. I don't care what your goal is. If you're an athlete, if you just want to be healthy, if you want to lose weight, if you're just trying to manage stress, this is a very important show, because so many people, like I said earlier before you got on, Dr. Webster, some people recognize that we don't produce vitamins and minerals. Some people don't know that. Some people are aware that they're important for certain strengthening of our immune system or preventing certain diseases. But I don't think people really correlate that it's equally as profound in our health, that when we are deficient in them, that there's a direct correlation to certain issues we are having.
Okay, I don't know what you just said there, but I think I know where you're going with that. It's vital. Nutrients are everything, George. When it comes to health, nutrients are literally everything. The structure of our body is completely 100% made of nutrients. You say the structure. What's the structure? Well, the structure is our skeleton, made of bone, which is calcium, magnesium, all different kinds of proteins. Those are all nutrients. Our muscles, our tendons, our ligaments are all made of proteins and fats and all different nutrients. Our blood cells, all of our cells in our body, they're all made of nutrients. So just the simple makeup of our body, even when we die and we're no longer living, so we're no longer functioning, we're still structurally made up of 100% nutrients. There's nothing else in our body. We don't have steel girders and wood beams or anything like that in our body. We have nutrients that makes up the structure. But also, more importantly, or equally as important, I suppose, not more, but it's the function of our body. The things that make us be able to think, the things that make us be able to get up and move. So our muscles, when we're dead and we no longer function, our muscles just sit there limp. But when we're alive and we have nutrients in our bodies, it's nutrients that allow us to contract our muscles, to fire the nerves, to make the muscles contract. It's all run on nutrients. The hormones in our body that regulate lots of things, maybe thyroid hormone, as an example, makes our temperature either go up or go down, our metabolism either go up or go down. That's all based on nutrients. The hormones themselves are made 100% of nutrients, and the chemicals that allow those nutrients to combine into thyroid hormone are themselves nutrients. So really, it's all about nutrients when it comes to human beings.
So what I was saying in the beginning, when you said you didn't know what I was getting at, I was just refreshing what I was talking about before you got on, that we don't produce certain vitamins and minerals. We have to ingest them.
We do. Right. We have to, and that means that they are essential. So I think maybe one of the first things we might want to discuss is what are the essential nutrients, meaning we absolutely have to consume them, and which ones are not necessarily essential, but are they helpful still to consume things that aren't 100%?
So before we do that, I wanted to go into causes of nutrient deficiencies. I think that's going to be much more profound than which nutrients we're deficient in and what they're responsible for, because you know, when you're deficient in nutrients, you're just not getting the certain amount that you need for that day or days. It leads to digestion problems, skin disorders, a compromised immune system. And I'm going to go off on a tangent for a moment. This is what I do. You know me for a long time. If you go to your doctor, if you go to your medical doctor and they lack in this area and they begin to tell you what to eat and how to exercise, I would follow up with a question and ask, when and where did you get your nutrition degree? And it's not being cocky. It's not being arrogant. It's just when and where. It's a question, because you have to be your own advocate here, right? And if the doctor begins quoting studies and government and all that stuff, run, leave, because they didn't answer your question and they're going on government standards that have nothing to do with you. And I mean that 99% of that, literally nothing to do with you. So an empowering statement is this: if you break your foot, do you call a neurologist or a cardiologist to help fix you? Let's start using common sense. Let's identify that doctors are to treat, they weren't taught to prevent. Certain doctors today are going back to school, or they're getting expanded medical knowledge that helps them to identify the importance of prevention and what that looks like, but most don't. So let's make sure when you have a certain need, you want to lose weight, you want to feel better, you want to prevent yourself from having to go to the doctor or even going to get the flu shot. How do you do that? Who do you talk to? Let's talk to a Dr. Jeremy Webster who has nutrition focus, myself, nutrition focus after these 30 years, whatever. And a clinical nutritionist who has this as a specialty, a naturopath doctor, integrative medicine doctor. We covered this on my radio show last week. It's real important that we find the specialist to meet our specific needs. So let's talk about that. What causes nutrient deficiencies?
A few things can cause it. Number one is the most obvious. You're simply not consuming enough of the nutrients. That's going to be the clear, obvious answer that most people are going to think about. A lot of even professionals might consider that the sole reason for deficiencies. So, but I would completely disagree with that, though, because that's not really the case primarily today. In the old days, let's say when the Europeans were traveling over on ships from Europe to America, they simply couldn't bring enough produce. Produce doesn't last long enough to, you know, survive the trip on the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria. It doesn't. So you run out of certain things. You aren't able to consume certain things like fresh fruits and vegetables. So you end up with a deficiency of vitamin C, and you end up with scurvy. That's technical medical definition of vitamin C deficiency. And you start losing your teeth, your gums start to rot, and your bones start to deteriorate. It's really horrible. But that's because you simply weren't consuming any of the foods that had that in it. So that's number one. But the second is you might be consuming enough of a certain nutrient, but maybe you're not absorbing it. So it goes to digestion. You may be consuming just as much as me, George, but if you have a problem with your digestion and all of your vitamin C is just passing right through you, what good does that really do? It's not a nutrient to nourish the gut. It's a nutrient that's supposed to absorb from the gut into the bloodstream and then nourish your entire body. So if you don't absorb things properly, you're going to have signs and symptoms of deficiency. And then the third thing I'd like to mention is genetic requirement for excessive need in some cases. There's a certain type of gene or genetic makeup that makes people extremely dependent on higher levels of folate, or folic acid being the synthetic version. MTHFR is the gene if you want to look into it, but those people might consume just as much folate as you or I. They might absorb it just as well as you or I, but it doesn't matter because they need maybe 10 or 20 or 50 times as much in their system to make them function like they have normal folate. The same with a lot of the other nutrients. Some people have higher levels of requirement just to make them function like they're supposed to. George, I remember when we tested your genes long ago, you had a higher level of vitamin D requirement versus the average person. So the average person might do quite well at 40, 45, or 50. You might do the same at 65, for example.
Right, and we know anybody who has darker skin, I have olive skin, African Americans have much darker skin. You're not absorbing as much vitamin D from the sun, therefore you need more. By the way, Laura just commented about the soil. The soil is less nutrient dense, therefore our food has less nutrients in it. We have to consume much more. Hence the reason for supplementation, and doing so with professional grade supplements, not the crap you buy in a retail setting in a store, because I'd say 99% of those don't have what they say they have in them, or if they do, a lot of them are synthetic and they're not going to give you the benefit. And then you see these studies that come out that say supplements don't work. They're right, because the ones they're testing aren't the professional grade ones that Dr. Webster and I focus on. Dr. Webster's website is CompleteHealthDallas.com. Mine is 21daybodymakeover.com. Let me go into some of my reasons, and I'm glad you shared yours for nutrient deficiencies. This would be a little bit of an overlap, more of a breakdown of what you said when we talk about stress and not getting enough. Number one, poor diet, right? If you have a poor diet, you're not getting the nutrients you need. We all know that, kind of common sense. But also chronic medication use. Whenever you use medication, it addresses symptoms. Medication does not make you healthier. It robs from your body. It removes nutrients from your body. Therefore, you have to replace them. What's the trick? The trick, it's twofold. The trick is identifying the nutrients that the medication is robbing you of, and then replace that exact amount or more to prevent being harmed by the medication. We also have mental and emotional stress. We have disease. How about exercise? People who exercise so much, you need more supplementation because you're utilizing them more. So when Dr. Webster talks about stress or not getting enough or not absorbing enough, this is all true, but there are different stressors we have at different times. And so if you have a cold, you're more challenged when you have a cold, or you're sick or something, you need more on that day or those days. Let me just finish up with this, because it's a thought I had and I've been on the radio show before. We know for a fact that if you have chronic stress for a period of time, let's say 1 week, you lost a loved one, you had some serious issues in your relationship, money issues, whatever that is, and it's on your mind for a while. We know for a fact that the sickness that you get, let's say it's a cold, can show up 12 weeks later. After all the stress is gone, let's say you experience that stress for 3 weeks. The sickness that you might get from it by having a compromised immune system can show up all the way 12 weeks later. We're looking at 3 months. So during that time of being stressed or being, well, we can just say stressed, depending on what the stress is, it's important that you take more of certain nutrients. And that's what we're going to get into today, which nutrients we need, number one. And I want you to tackle what happens when we're under stress. Of these certain nutrients, do we need more? Like vitamin D, we probably don't need more. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. It sticks with us for a while, but vitamin C and B is more rapidly used. And I don't want to take the wind out of your sail. I want you to go through that. So go ahead.
Well, that was a wonderful expansion upon my my basic things that cause you to become deficient. And the one thing I want to add to this is the word deficient is more of a technical term. Insufficiency might be another term that we might throw out there that means sort of the same thing. And basically it means like, okay, if you are, let's stick vitamin D, for example, because a lot of people have had their vitamin D checked. Maybe you haven't, that's okay. But when you look at the blood levels of vitamin D, it's quite broad, maybe from 20 to 100. So they say that if you're below 20, you're technically deficient in vitamin D. You're at great risk of developing bone softening, osteomalacia, things like that. Big problems. But does that mean that 25 you're good, or 30 you're good, or 35 you're good? And when you look at some of the studies that's looking at optimization of these nutrients, we find that about 45 to 60 might be the optimal range. If you're anywhere in there, you're optimal. Too far above that can cause some problems of excess. But even below 45, even though you're not technically deficient, below 45 is suboptimal or insufficient. So you want to not only prevent deficiency, but shoot toward optimization of some of these nutrients. So you don't have to be completely deficient in something to the point where you have frank anemia. What about if your blood cells are starting to change a little bit and you know that maybe a year from now, if you continue on this, you're going to have anemia? Are you good right now? I say no, you're insufficient right now, and it's going to lead to problems of deficiency later on. So let's try to optimize rather than just worry about preventing deficiency.
So when you talk about optimize, this is equally as important. Something I need you to share, because the values, if you will, because I'm using these air quotes because I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but let's call them the values or percentages that we are, here's our air quotes again, supposed to have by the government standards, are completely different than what I would look at, you would look at, integrative medicine doctor would look at. They're not the same. So if you go to your doctor and you get your blood tested and you get your cholesterol tested, they might say, oh my gosh, it's really, really bad at 240. Where another doctor might say, hey, it's great because your HDL is at this level at 75 and your ratios are good. So you're going to get a different perspective. One from a doctor who understands nutrition and the prevention side and the real breakdown, and another from the government that says, wait, you're just unhealthy. We need to start giving you all this medication.
Right. I don't know where I want to go with that.
I think the best thing to do, Doc, don't you think, is talk about the test that you have from SpectraCell that shows definitive answers whether you're nutrient deficient or not?
Let's go into nutrients themselves first, and then we'll talk about testing.
You want to hit iron first? You and I never rehearse shows, and I love that. Do you want to do iron or take that out?
No, what I want to do is give you a broad overview of the different classifications of nutrients that are essential. Those would be vitamins. Vitamins are essential. Vitamin A, all the B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, which is a multitude of compounds. It's not one single vitamin. Those are vital or essential nutrients. We have to consume those in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, we become deficient, ill, potentially even die of nutrient deficiency. Minerals are, as far as essential minerals are essential. So your magnesium, your zinc, your calcium, potassium, chloride, sodium, those are, even though we think, oh, sodium's bad, right? No, sodium is an essential nutrient. It's required for nerve function, muscle function. It's a required electrolyte. You have to have sodium in your system. Otherwise, you seize up and die. It's that simple. And there's a lot more. There's dozens and dozens of trace minerals or metals that are essential, but sometimes in very small amounts, like selenium, for example, and some of the others. So there's vitamins and minerals. Also, amino acids. Human beings have a requirement of about 8 amino acids that we have to consume because we can't produce those. The rest of them, the other 12 or so, are technically not essential. You don't 100% have to consume them, although my advice is to consume all 20 of the amino acids, because just because you could make one amino acid from another doesn't mean you're going to very well. Some people are good at converting one amino acid into another, like methionine into cysteine, for example, and on into taurine, for example. But it's much better if you consume foods that have cysteine and taurine in them, because you might be one of those people who are terrible at converting the essential methionine into those others that are not quite technically essential. And you're going to have problems of deficiency in things like cysteine and taurine if you don't consume them. In fact, cats, George, when they are put on a vegan diet, which you should never do to a cat or a dog, they will die of taurine deficiency. That's the amino acid that they as a cat have to consume taurine, otherwise they die. It's essential for them. Their metabolism isn't exactly like ours. But for a human being, taurine could be considered a conditionally essential nutrient. Some people absolutely have to consume it because they're not going to make enough of it on their own.
All right, so let's break this down a little bit, okay? Let's talk pain points with people. There are certain people, men and women, who are looking at reproductive health. They want to have a child. They might have an issue. A vitamin they absolutely need is vitamin A. It's not only eye health, but it's reproductive health. So let's connect these supplements to real or just nutrients, even if you get them from food, to real world issues, so people can say, okay, I need this because this is what I'm trying to work on with my wife or my eyes. It's not just carrots and beta carotene, it's vitamin A.
If you want to go down the road of vitamin A, yeah, that's the stuff that makes a really good, healthy, farm-raised, open pasture egg. When the chicken is able to roam and eat bugs and worms like it's supposed to, it's getting vitamin A from the bugs and worms that it's eating. Vitamin A is the stuff that makes those yolks look very dark, rich orange looking.
Yeah.
Also, if you get real butter, real organic butter from good cows that eat the right type of green grass their whole life, the butter from those from those cows will be more orange than this pale stuff from cows that are just fed grain. That's vitamin A. And yeah, it's vital for the immunity. It's good for your eyes. You can have symptoms. You can develop symptoms of low hormone levels, even though your hormone levels might check perfectly fine. If you don't have enough vitamin A, the receptors on all your cells where that hormone floating around is supposed to attach to, if you don't have enough vitamin A, that receptor doesn't work like it's supposed to, and the hormone will just keep bumping off, and it won't be able to attach to your cell. Therefore, it won't be able to do its job, and you'll feel like you have low levels of hormone, even though your doctor swears, nope, your thyroid levels are perfectly fine. You don't have low thyroid.
So
but you feel like you have.
So let's also say for people who don't eat and have milk or eggs, you have it in your dark green vegetables, also your kale, broccoli, and spinach, right? Even your orange vegetables, your carrots, and I think pumpkin and sweet potatoes, right, have it?
Yeah, they'll have a lot of the beta carotene, which is basically a precursor. If you eat beta carotene, your body can convert beta carotene into vitamin A. So it's good to have a combination of both, in my opinion.
So let's go.
One other thing I wanted to mention, George. Let me mention one other thing, because when I was listing the essentials, I mentioned the vitamins, the minerals, and the amino acids from protein. The other basic class of essential nutrients, the only other one that's left is essential fatty acids. They are essential. Non-nutrient essentials include fiber and water. And that's about it as far as absolute 100% essentials, George. And is there one thing that you noticed that I said that I didn't mention in those things that are essential, things that you have to consume? Is there anything that jumps out at you like, huh, he didn't mention that?
So interesting you say that. I have a study that I pulled up, a new study I pulled up today, and hopefully you can correct me on this. It comes from the Journal of Neurology. No? You don't know it either. 116 healthy adults, 65 to 75 years old. They looked at a study where they added omega-6 and omega-3s, obviously the healthy omega-6s, not the industrial oil ones. And they said there's a direct correlation to better blood-brain health and cognitive function when they had pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, pine nuts, pistachios. Now lycopene, you had your alpha and beta carotenes and vitamin B and D. And they said that it's imperative for people to have these things, especially as they age, to prolong or prevent cognitive issues. And so that's the essential stuff that I think we're getting at now.
Yeah, and George, that's exactly right. Fats are essential. If you don't consume those type of fats, specifically the omega-3s and the omega-6s, you will become deficient, ill, and ultimately, if it was extreme enough, you could die from not consuming fats. Now, the one thing that I was trying to get you to say, you weren't on the same page as me at the time, was there was no mention of carbohydrates or sugar being essential as far as the nutrient goes.
Well, hold on.
You know, so we mentioned protein, we mentioned fat.
On. Let me tell you, I have my pizza and I have my brownies every single day. I'm healthy. I have a ton of sugar. Are you telling me that's wrong?
Well, we eat a lot of things that aren't essential, right?
You know,
a lot of people at MSG.
I'm kidding. Because when
I do.
So get into you. What do you think of this? Because I think I know where you're going with this. The brain is made up of about 60% fat. We need fat. It's imperative for it to function a certain way. But when you have these fats, you're less inclined to not focus, but to crave the brownies and the pizza.
You are, absolutely. And now you're talking about modifying the diet, and you're absolutely right. Over time, you'll become more nourished with the things that you're supposed to have, the essential things. You'll become very good at burning fat and ketones, which comes from fat. You'll be good at burning those things for energy. Your brain will become good at burning those for energy. Your heart and your muscles will love to use those for energy. And you just will not need or crave the carbohydrates because you're well nourished. My big point was, if you never eat a carbohydrate in your life, you can be healthy. Yeah. You can live a long, healthy life.
Well, hold on.
Carbohydrate.
Let's break this down for a minute. I have to interrupt. You take carbohydrate, people think of what I mentioned earlier, the brownies and the pizza and so on. But my salad every night with tomatoes in it is also carbohydrates. So let's make sure we separate those.
No, well, not much. There's not much carbohydrate. There is some carbohydrate, but if you took the sugar content or the starch content out of your squash and carrots and tomatoes and just left everything else, if you remove the carbohydrates completely, you could still live a completely 100% healthy life to 100 years old and not ever have any signs of deficiency. That's my point here. There's no essential carbohydrate. It doesn't exist. Look it up if you don't believe me. There's no conditionally essential carbohydrate. We have carbohydrate in our body. There are things that we need carbohydrate for in our body. You do not have to consume carbohydrates in order to make carbohydrates. We will manufacture the carbohydrates that we need internally quite well if we consume the other things that we are supposed to consume, vitamins, mineral, protein, and essential fats, along with something that I would say is conditionally essential but not directly specific, is antioxidants. Antioxidants, yes, some of the vitamins have antioxidant properties. I shouldn't say antioxidants aren't essential, because they are. Vitamin A is essential, vitamin E is essential, selenium is essential. Those are antioxidants. Vitamin C is essential. That's an antioxidant. But the things that you get from, say, grape skin, resveratrol, not essential. You could live your whole life and be completely healthy without ever consuming resveratrol. Or the stuff, the purple stuff that you get from purple onions, which is quercetin, or the stuff that you get from pine bark, or the stuff that you get from garlic, on and on and on. You could never consume any of those things and be perfectly healthy. But you can't not consume any of them. You have to consume some of those nutrients. Like, so if you have a problem with garlic, you never have to consume garlic. Just consume other antioxidant-rich foods. If you don't like grapes and you don't drink wine, that's fine. You don't have to consume resveratrol. Just make sure you consume other antioxidants. You have to consume some, but it's not specific as to which you have to consume.
So let me bring up 2 points. For those who love drinking wine, I'm about to burst your bubble. To get enough resveratrol from wine, you'd have to have a whole bottle of wine. Now you have other problems. That's number one. And I mean that quite literally. Number two, no clue where I was going. Doesn't matter. So, number two, antioxidants. You and I did a show several years ago on the radio about people who take an exorbitant amount of antioxidants to try to be healthy. I think you really need to go off on a branch of the tree here and talk about the disadvantages of people who take high amounts of antioxidants. It's not beneficial.
Oh, yeah, good. That's important because, first of all, we have to understand first that antioxidants work as a network or a combination rather than just one thing. So one thing that could be quite bad is if you eat a very antioxidant void diet and you just take tons of one antioxidant, let's say tons of vitamin C or tons of vitamin E, thinking, well, I need my antioxidants, so I'm just going to take a lot of this. And it says, wow, this is one of the best antioxidants, so I should be covered. No, that's actually quite bad, because what you really need is you need a combination of some vitamin C, vitamin A, glutathione, superoxide dismutase, coenzyme Q10, vitamin E, if I didn't already say that. You need these things to work together and basically hand these dangerous particles, these free radicals, off one at a time to slowly chip away at its harmfulness. By the time it goes through all of these different antioxidants and then gets help from things like resveratrol and quercetin and chlorophyll and all the other good antioxidants you get from your diet, it's able to basically turn that dangerous free radical into water in the end. One antioxidant cannot do that. Vitamin E by itself cannot do that. Glutathione cannot do that. Vitamin C cannot do that. But when you get them all together, lipoic acid is the other one I wanted to mention. When you get all those together, they work quite well together and they're able to finish the job. So don't take just one massive amount of one antioxidant and think you're doing yourself any good. The second thing, which I think what you were getting to, George, is that if you take all of them in combination, you have good balance, but you take way, way, way too much. That's not necessarily a great thing in a lot of cases, because antioxidants are there to battle free radicals. So you have this harmful, potentially harmful charged particle, and an antioxidant neutralizes it, or the combination of antioxidants neutralizes it. That sounds great if you're at reasonable doses and you're neutralizing any excess. So when we eat a bunch of fatty foods, we have to have antioxidants because you give off free radicals just by turning fat into a calorie. So you need antioxidants to prevent that. But what you should know is the inflammatory action and the free radical action that happens naturally in our body has to be there for certain things. When a cancer cell develops, you need to use that inflammation and that free radical to destroy that cancer cell right when it starts. If you have a virus or a bacteria, you need to use inflammation and free radicals to destroy that potentially harmful microbe. If you take too many antioxidants or too many anti-inflammatory supplements, like say you eat 10 omega-3 pills a day and you do it for 10 or 20 years. That's way too much. That can reduce or suppress your immune system so much, or your inflammatory system so much, that you can't destroy that cancer cell or that virus or that bacteria, and you get a massive infection or you develop cancer. So it's really a matter of a balancing act to make sure you have enough, but don't overdo it. Let's not get crazy or carried away with too many antioxidants or too much anti-inflammatory nutrition, because that can be just as harmful.
So you're saying too much is not better. You're really disappointing me today. All right, so somebody's asking a question here, Sable. Definitely taking notes. Okay, what salt, sodium requirements do you recommend?
What salt or what?
Sodium requirements.
Oh, I just recommend eating.
The World Health Organization said air pollution kills 7 million people per year. Our body has a natural ability to detoxify. However, it wasn't designed to handle the constant burden of unhealthy food and air pollution. To tackle this problem, we created the Keto Cleanse. Ketosis occurs when your body runs out of carbohydrate stores and begins using fat for energy. The Keto Cleanse forces your body to produce ketones, which naturally switches you from a carb burner to a fat burner. You won't miss unhealthy carbs when you add high fat such as bacon, cheese, guacamole, and other favorite foods to help you become a fat burner. And for the nerd in you, we'll provide the science of how this process works. You won't feel restricted by the food you love on the Keto Cleanse. Tim Tebow loves keto. Check out the video on our site. Visit 21daybodymakeover.com/keto now and click on Keto Cleanse. You'll receive cleanse supplements, a keto cookbook with desserts such as keto brownies, and grocery lists, recipes, and exercise videos. That's 21daybodymakeover.com/keto.
Celtic or Himalayan sea salt. Himalayan's the pink stuff, Celtic's the gray stuff. Use that and salt your food, and you should be fine.
So I want to go along the same premise about fat for a moment before we get into these other nutrients we're going to list out. There are a lot of people who think that one type of fat is going to benefit them like as if they had all different type of fats, and that's not true. We need olive oil and avocado, which are both omega-9s, right? We need omega-3s. We need saturated fat. We need fats from different sources to benefit us in different ways. One fat does not replace all fat. We don't have to continue down that road unless you want to.
I want to. It's important because fat is not fat, like you said. Fat is kind of like saying, I need a vitamin. Well, what does that mean? You need vitamin B12? Because if you take vitamin C, you're not doing anything to fix a problem if vitamin B12 was your problem. So you have to be specific and take vitamin B12. Fats are just as diverse as all of the vitamins that I mentioned earlier. Like you said, there are saturated fats. Saturated fat is not one thing, it's tons of different things. There's a bunch of different saturated fats that all have different functions. There are polyunsaturated fats, which there are a bunch of those. Omega-6s and omega-3s are both polyunsaturated fats. Guess what? There's more than one omega-6 and there's more than one omega-3. You need a lot of the different omega-3s and omega-6s, which are all the polyunsaturated. And then you have the monounsaturated, which are kind of in the middle of saturated fats and the polyunsaturated fats. And that's where you get to your omega-7s, which are less commonly known. Omega-9s, which are the monounsaturates, like you mentioned. But those fall into the monounsaturated fats. Folic acid, folate, for example. So you need a good combination of a lot of different types of fats if you really want to be healthy.
So let's get into some more of the nutrients and break down how they're affecting people on an everyday basis. If somebody's concerned about their nervous system or their, this is a big one, converting carbohydrates into energy, right? There are certain nutrients that do that. Why don't we get into one that you mentioned earlier, is thiamine, how it affects your metabolism.
Yeah, thiamine's, that's vitamin B1. For you to take not only a sugar, but it also fat, or even an amino acid from protein. You can convert any of those into energy, and they all go through the same exact cycle. Those fats, carbohydrates, and even some protein can enter this cycle called the Krebs cycle, and it's driven by thiamine, which you mentioned, and a lot of the other B complex vitamins, and magnesium, and iron, and cysteine, and lipoic acid. It requires all of those nutrients to make that cycle work so that you can convert a calorie into energy in the end. So if you're suffering from fatigue, that might be one of the first things you notice when you're low in some of your B complex vitamins. It's not the only thing that can cause fatigue. Lots of different things that could cause fatigue, but that's one of them certainly that you might see if your thiamine levels go low. Thiamine also, this is important with thiamine. Thiamine is required for the brain to function normally. So if you drink too much alcohol, you can cause depletion or deficiency in thiamine, and it leads to this syndrome called Wernicke-Korsakoff's disease, or Korsakoff's syndrome, I think, but it's Wernicke-Korsakoff's. And it's basically your brain is just degenerating rapidly because you're driving yourself into thiamine deficiency in the brain. It's generally caused by alcohol consumption, but anything that would drive you into thiamine deficiency would also cause the same type of symptoms. It's not an alcohol symptom, it's a thiamine deficiency symptom.
And you and I both have supplements, but you don't have to take supplements. Dr. Webster's website is CompleteHealthDallas.com, mine is 21daybodymakeover.com. You click the other supplements tab or daily supplements, you'll see them. But with that said, let's talk about what that's in. Thiamines in eggs, legumes, nuts, seeds, even wheat germ. I'm not a fan of it, but it's in pork. You know, it's in many things. You don't have to have a supplement for every one of these nutrients we're discussing today. There are certain ones though, like omega-3s. I think the government recommendation for omega-3s was like 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams before. Now we see in some strong studies, it's more like between 2,000 and 4,000 milligrams a day.
Okay, which would be about 2 capsules is what we're talking.
Well, it depends. If you get the omega veil that has 1,000 each, then it would be 2 capsules. Otherwise, some only have like 650, and then you have to take 3 or 4, whatever. You want to get into niacin, the flushing versus the non-flushing? Which one's beneficial? Is one better than the other? And why?
Niacin, vitamin B3 is what is niacin. And yeah, niacin can have some effects on, well, niacin's within that Krebs cycle also that we talked about. It's one of the key nutrients that drives that Krebs cycle. So again, you might have issues with energy if your niacin's low. Certain types of niacin would cause your blood vessels to dilate so much that you might start turning red. Some people take this because they like the flush or the pump feeling, I guess. If you're working out, some people like that. I don't know why you'd like to feel all flushed like that, but whatever, I suppose.
But so let's break this down for a moment, Doc. When you say it's part of the Krebs cycle, for people just joining us, or if you didn't get it earlier, we're talking about converting carbohydrates into energy. That's like the woo-woo, everything goes off. Hey, okay, I'm eating too many carbs. I need to convert that to energy. Yeah. So if you're eating too many carbs and you have a horrible diet and you're not exercising, you're having trouble converting carbohydrates to energy. You'll want these, but they don't supplement your current lifestyle. They just help support it, and they're not going to do it in lieu of. It just helps to support it versus if you had none at all. So go ahead.
Well, yeah, back to the flushing versus non-flushing. You can get more of a natural form that's non-flushing niacin. That is something that a lot of people use for cardiovascular benefits, is taking vitamin B3. So that would be some of the other things other than just the energy production or the turning fat, converting fat and calories into energy. There is the cardiovascular benefits. You can see changes in blood pressure and even lipids when you take enough of these things. Whether that really, I'll be honest here, whether that affects cardiovascular risk, I really don't know, because it seems like some studies show that when you take enough niacin to make these kind of changes, it's kind of like when you take a statin, you see the cholesterol levels change, but you don't see the reduction in heart attack and stroke risk change.
It's a false positive.
Yeah, it's something that makes you believe you've done something good for yourself, but maybe it hasn't really done you that much good. I generally don't recommend it. Too much vitamin B3 or niacin can be a little bit rough on the liver also. So I just say, if you're deficient or insufficient in it, take enough to cause optimization, but I wouldn't personally use something like that in excess just to cause a change in a lab, like a cholesterol level or something like that. That's me personally. Somebody else might disagree.
Let's get into B9 folate. This is one that you and I have talked about ad nauseum over through the years, even before you were on my radio show. And the reason for that, it gets so much attention. We know it's important for brain development and certain nervous system function. And that's why a lot of these doctors, especially OB-GYNs, will give these prenatal vitamins, and they have folic acid in them. And this is really important for you to listen to when we talk about a naturally occurring substance versus one that's created synthetically. That's not always a terrible thing, but when it comes to folate and then folic acid, this could be really dangerous for you. We've known this for quite a number of years. I don't think enough people either know it or appreciate it. When you get the cheap supplements, you get the cheap results, and you can also hurt yourself over a period of time. So let's talk about the dangers of folic acid and the positives of folate.
Right. Folate is found in foliage. So when you eat a lot of greens, that's why it's called folate, is because you find it in spinach and kale and all the green stuff, your foliage. You make big salads all the time, you're probably consuming enough folate. Folate is the nutrient in nature. It's a vitamin B9. It is essential. If you don't have enough folate, you don't make enough of any of the brain chemicals, the neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine. So you might start seeing signs and symptoms of depression or anxiety or fatigue, brain fog, or trouble sleeping if you're not making a certain chemical called GABA. It can go on and on and on. It's really important that we have enough folate. Beyond that, it's one of the I would say one of the three most common causes of anemia. Anemia means you're not making enough red blood cells. Red blood cells' job is to transport oxygen through your body so that you can metabolize calories into energy. Going back to that Krebs cycle, it's not necessarily the Krebs, but right after the Krebs, there's another cycle that depends on oxygen. There's a reason why we breathe every 2 to 3 seconds, George. We need oxygen constantly because we constantly need to make energy from that oxygen. Well, guess what? If you're deficient in folate, vitamin B9, you don't make red blood cells appropriately. Therefore, you can't transport oxygen to your heart, muscles, liver, brain, skin, etc. Therefore, you can't make energy in any of those organs, tissues, cells. You will start to wither away because you don't have enough folate. Now, folic acid is something that they create in a lab. It doesn't really exist in nature, but it's very similar in structure to folate. Close enough that when you eat it, your body can usually take that folic acid and make a little conversion and turn it into the folate, which is what our body uses to do all of these special things that folate does, like prevent birth defects. Folic acid's really good at preventing birth defects because most people can convert it into folate. But guess what? Really, you just need folate. Folate prevents the birth defects. Folic acid can just do it as well as long as you make that conversion. I say as long as you make that conversion because there's a small subset of the population that doesn't make that conversion properly, George. That's a problem. For the people that take folic acid, convert it 100% into folate, it's fine. It does rob you of a few nutrients because nothing's for free. You can't make a chemical conversion for nothing. So it takes some nutrients to make that conversion, but whatever. It's not going to cause much of a problem. But for people who don't efficiently make that conversion from folic acid, the synthetic stuff, into the natural form of folate, that folic acid hangs around and it can build up. And folic acid can cause cancer, unfortunately. So if you don't make that conversion efficiently, folic acid supplementation will or can cause cancer. It's not going to in most people, but you don't want to take that chance. So, there's no reason to, because now you can supplement with natural folate.
So are you also going to comment on the genetic mutations that prevent people from actually methylating folate, which means to convert it to a form where the body can use it?
That goes back to that same thing I mentioned earlier, which is called MTFHR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase is the enzyme. So some people don't have a genetic mutation, which basically means that doesn't work very well. So if that's the case with you, you need lots and lots and lots of the pre-methylated version of folate. We have to have that. We have to be able to methylate it so that it can do things in our body like produce important antioxidants or produce taurine, which helps us relax and calm down and keeps our heart from racing. It's really important that we have this. And if you have this MTFHR gene or the wrong gene pertaining to that, you need to be supplementing with high levels. If you supplement with the right levels, if you identify it and supplement properly, you can combat all that. It's not a problem. You use natural folate that's methylated already, and you're good.
So earlier you commented that it's a small part of the population. It may not be as small as you think. My other company, Genetic Direction, tests for this. And so you'll be able to then identify whether you need a methylated version or not. But why not just go to the original source in the first place where you know you're definitively converting it instead of having to get tested and get the methylated folate instead of looking at the cheap way. So because you're playing Russian roulette when you do the cheap way. So you mentioned anemia earlier, and you mentioned it a couple of times. Let's get into iron.
Okay.
All right.
Iron is just like when I mentioned folate. Folate is one of the things that is required to make a healthy red blood cell. Remember, the red blood cell transports oxygen. That's all it does, but that's a quite vital role in the body. That's, like I said, that's why we constantly breathe in oxygen. It's important. We have to have the red blood cells to transport oxygen to every single cell throughout our entire body. Iron is equally as important in creating that red blood cell. If you don't have enough folate or enough B12 or some of the other B vitamins, those red blood cells will get too big, and they're not efficient when they're too big. When you have deficiencies in iron, those red blood cells will get too small. And so you start to see those kind of changes early on. Remember when I tried to explain the difference between deficiency versus insufficiency, or suboptimal levels of nutrients? You start to see these changes, and they're getting a little bit too big or they're getting a bit too small when you start to see insufficiencies or suboptimal levels of iron or B12 or folate. And over time, if it continues to the point where you're deficient in iron, B12, or folate, that's when you get total anemia, where now you don't even have enough number of red blood cells. You don't produce the red blood cells properly. So you then run into anemia, which means you're not delivering oxygen. You're going to have horrible fatigue, brain fog. Your skin won't be nice and rosy looking. It'll be very pale. Even if you go out and tan, the red blood cells are kind of a part of what makes you look pink.
So let's get into
so
I want to just read off some of the long-term huge disadvantages of being anemic. Long-term and big disadvantages: colon cancer, imbalanced gut flora. So it's not always about bacteria. Okay, we're talking about iron here. Crohn's disease. So people who have a horrible diet, I call Crohn's disease, like type 2 diabetes, a voluntary diet. You basically signed up for it. It's your fault. You can change your lifestyle and not have it anymore. And I know a lot of people get angry at that. Can't tell you how many people I've helped who had Crohn's disease. One of my very best friends, I'm a godfather to his daughter, doesn't have it anymore because he stayed the course by changing his life completely with his diet, so on and so on. Celiac disease. Pregnancy can also cause an iron deficiency. And then also I want to go off on bariatric surgery. Yeah, you lose weight with bariatric surgery, but it doesn't improve long-term benefits because it robs you of that nutrient and you become nutrient deficient when you have bariatric surgery. The stomach is now smaller.
Yeah, right. Also with iron, there are symptoms of low iron also, George, that aren't related to anemia. While low iron will cause anemia ultimately, low iron affects a lot of other things. There are multiple things that iron is required for: protein synthesis, hormone production, thyroid specifically. If you have low thyroid, sometimes it's just because you don't have enough iron. Iron is required for your thyroid gland to make the hormone efficiently. So is selenium, so is vitamin D, so is zinc, on and on. There's a lot of nutrients that are required, but you have to have these cofactors, is what they're called. They're not structurally part of thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is just an amino acid called tyrosine and a mineral called iodine. Bing. But you know what? If you put those things in a petri dish and mix them together, you don't end up with thyroid hormone. It has to be something that happens in the body through enzymatic processes that require certain cofactors, is what they're called, which are the vitamins and minerals that I mentioned: the selenium, the iron, the vitamin C, the vitamin D. So you have to have those, otherwise you end up deficient in hormones, and it goes way beyond that. You can look at all the things that require iron, and it's quite a lengthy list when you get into the physiology and the biochemistry of iron.
So when I talked earlier, for people who are just joining, both Dr. Webster and I sell supplements for this, but you don't have to go the supplement route. You can get dark leafy green vegetables, even red meat, egg yolks, beans and lentils have them. Poultry and pork and shellfish has sufficient amounts of iron. By the way, Laura, I know you're asking about pH balance. We're not going to do pH balance on this show. We'll do that another show where we talk about alkaline versus acidity. You want to wrap this up, Webster? We can go for on and on for a very long time. You want to hit B12 and then wrap it up after that?
B12 is a lot like folate in that it has an important function as far as creating and maintaining red blood cells, but it also has there are neurological consequences when you have low B12 levels. You could have memory losses, you could have numbness and tingling. Really, your nervous system can start to degenerate. Unfortunately, some of this degeneration in your nervous system can be permanent if it's bad enough and severe enough and it lasts long enough. So don't let any of these neurological type of of symptoms go on. It's important that you catch them quickly. And if it's something like a B12 issue, it's so easy to correct. Some people don't absorb vitamin B12, even if you take it orally in pretty reasonable amounts, George. But you can get around that quite easily. Some people just get injections. I'm perfectly fine with that if you want to get injections of B12. But you have to get injections and then maintain those levels. So check them, maintain them. Don't get a B12 shot and then go on for the next 10 years and think you're fine. You might be fine for the next month or 6 weeks. But come on, you don't want to take something to be good for a couple months and then go right back into your deficiency. So if you're deficient in vitamin B12, there's a reason for it. And unless you change what was causing your vitamin B12, you're going to always slip back into B12 unless you consistently get a shot, consistently take sublingual. Those are the melts that you put under your tongue, and they absorb under the tongue. You don't have to swallow them, or it doesn't have to go through digestion, because some people only absorb about 4% as much vitamin B12 as the average person. You can get around that, though, by just taking about 25 times a recommended dose, and you can still get adequate absorption of B12. Even if you are elderly and you don't have the intrinsic factor in your gut to absorb B12 efficiently, you can just take more of it.
So
you
let's
still absorb it by swallowing vitamin B12.
Let's break that down for a little bit for people who may not know if they're susceptible to being deficient in it. We know for a fact vegans, they don't eat animal products, they're deficient in it. And they'll often say, well, I take B12. Hey, that's great, but are you absorbing it? And if you're not, you need the shots. So if they're not going that route, then they're not healthy. That's elderly people over 60. You said that also. That's number 2. Number 3 is gastric bypass. We know that people are deficient in nutrients there. Diabetes, if you're taking metformin, you're going to be deficient in certain nutrients, not just vitamin B12. And also a long use, and we're not going to get into this now. I can go on another one of George's branches of the trees. But one of the worst things you can take is an antacid. That causes severe deficiencies in many nutrients.
Calcium, minerals, vitamin B12 for sure. Because when I mentioned the intrinsic factor earlier, that's what's required for absorption of B12 through the gastrointestinal system, through the GI tract. Intrinsic factor is dependent on you making stomach acid. So yeah, when you get older, you get lower in stomach acid. When you get gastric bypass, you don't have the stomach acid. When you take antacids, you don't have the stomach acid. So all those lead to lower intrinsic factor, which means you don't absorb your B12 anymore. And then there goes your nervous system, there goes your red blood cells. Pain and suffering are coming unless you identify and correct the problem. But it can be corrected. Let's be real here. Just taking a few under the tongue melts, which taste like candy, is enough to solve a B12 problem. It's really easy to solve. So what you want to do is you want to check and test your B12 levels. And not only check your blood levels, check the functional levels, George. You and I might have exactly the same blood levels, but in you, let's say 600 is perfectly fine for you to function like you're supposed to with B12. For me, 600 isn't even scratching the surface. I might need 2,000 in my blood to do the same thing as you do on 600. So there are tests that can test functionally how well the B12 is functioning in your system. That's what you want to do. Not only the straight levels, but a functional test, which is what I look at. I look at all of the nutrients that create energy, and all the nutrients that detoxify, and all the nutrients that help us with neurotransmitters in the brain. And we identify whether not only are they enough, but are they enough for you specifically. And that's the only thing that matters. I don't want your levels to be the same as mine just because they work for me. I want them to work in you, even if that means double the amount for you.
So let's wrap this up. Your website is CompleteHealthDallas.com. Mine is 21daybodymakeover.com. Everyone who's watching now, we don't get much exposure this way unless you share this show. So share this with everyone. It's also put on my YouTube page. It'll be put on my 21-day body makeover page. Share this with people. Have them interact with us. Have a fantastic Christmas, holiday, whatever you're celebrating. Webster, lots of love to you and Amy and the rest of your family.
One more thing before we go. Thank you for that. Merry Christmas, George. We'll do a show. Are we going to do one next week right in the middle of the holidays? Or are we going to wait 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 weeks from now, we'll have our next show. I think that's about the 5th or so, somewhere around there, third to the 5th. We'll let everybody know on that. And if you're interested in this functional type testing, I'll put a link to that so you can find a way to get that testing so you can know whether you're insufficient or deficient in some of these nutrients that drive the metabolism and so on and so forth that we just